For a long time, I stayed quiet about something that made many people uncomfortable. Not because it was harmful, but because it didn't fit the narrative that had already been sold to the public. In clinical environments and research discussions, balance loss in older adults is usually framed as unavoidable, something to brace for, cushion against, or ensure. Entire systems are built around the assumption that instability is a one-way road. But what I observed behind the scenes told a very different story. While companies invested billions into devices, supports, supplements, polished fall prevention programs, researchers were quietly documenting something far less marketable, but far more powerful. Men and women in their late 70s, 80s, and even beyond, some already classified as high risk and functionally limited, were regaining balance through a handful of basic movements. No machines, no prescriptions, no recurring subscriptions. Just targeted physical actions that reactivated systems the body still had, but had stopped using. That simplicity is precisely why most people never hear about it. There is little incentive to promote something that can't be packaged or patented. If you're listening to this now, there's a good chance your body has already tried to get your attention.
Ow.
Maybe it was a moment of unsteadiness in the shower, a brief hesitation stepping off a curb, or the sudden realization that tying your shoes didn't feel as automatic as it once did. These moments are easy to dismiss. Most people do. They chalk them up to fatigue, distraction, or just getting older. But they aren't random. They are signals. Early warnings from your nervous system that certain connections are weakening. The problem is that balance doesn't fail dramatically at first. It erodes quietly. By the time a fall happens, the underlying decline has often been progressing for years. We are repeatedly told that balance loss is simply part of aging. But that explanation leaves out a crucial detail. What actually fades first is communication. The dialogue between the brain, the muscles, the joints, and the ground beneath your feet begins to slow down and fragment. When that communication weakens, the body reacts later, steps shorter, and confidence disappears long before strength itself is truly gone. Large population studies from Europe and Asia began noticing something that challenged the standard assumption. Older adults who failed basic balance tests weren't necessarily weaker, sicker, or too old. They were understimulated in very specific neuromuscular systems. When those systems were deliberately reactivated, balance improved, sometimes dramatically. This improvement didn't require extreme effort or athletic training. It required precision and consistency. The body, even late in life, retained the ability to adapt when it was given the correct signal. What made these findings? Uncomfortable was not what they showed, but what they implied. If balance could be improved with simple, targeted movement, then much of the fear-based narrative surrounding aging lost its power. By the end of this discussion, you'll understand why these ideas were never widely promoted and why for overlooked. Movement patterns can change how steady and confident you feel on your feet. When we reach the final movement, it becomes clear why researchers described it not as exercise in the traditional sense, but as a reconnection process, a way of restoring pathways that many assumed were permanently lost. One of the first movements researchers focused on looked almost too ordinary to matter. Standing up from a chair, not pushing with the hands, not rocking for momentum, simply rising under control. Yet this basic action turned out to be one of the strongest predictors of independence in adults over 80. The reason had little to do with raw muscle size and everything to do with power. Power is the ability to produce force quickly, and it is exactly what allows you to recover when you stumble, step awkwardly, or lose footing for a split second. Every time you stand up, climb stairs, or get out of bed, you rely on this ability. When it declines, daily tasks start to feel heavier, slower, and more uncertain. Practicing this movement properly reawakens fast-responding muscle fibers that tend to disappear fastest with age. Sitting toward the front edge of a sturdy chair, placing the feet flat and evenly spaced, crossing the arms to prevent assistance, leaning slightly forward from the hips, and standing smoothly without rocking, forces the legs and nervous system to work together again. Over time, this single movement improves not only the ability to stand, but also walking speed, stair climbing, and overall confidence. What surprised researchers was how transferable the benefits were. Training this one pattern improved many. Others because it addressed a foundational motor skill the body uses constantly. Another movement that produced outsized benefits was walking backward. At first glance, it seems almost trivial or even silly, but neurologically, it is anything but. Forward walking is automatic. Your brain has been doing it for decades with minimal conscious involvement. Backward walking removes that automation. The brain can't rely on habitual patterns and must actively process each step. This increased demand forces the nervous system to form new connections related to balance, coordination, and spatial awareness. Starting slowly in a safe environment, such as a hallway, and lightly touching a wall for guidance, older adults practiced taking deliberate steps backward. What emerged was a noticeable improvement not only in balance, but in forward walking itself. Stabilizing muscles around the knees and hips, often neglected in normal walking, were reactivated. Participants frequently reported feeling more aware of their body position and more confident in their movements after only a short period. This wasn't about conditioning or endurance, it was about waking up dormant systems that still existed, but had stopped receiving meaningful input. A third movement borrowed from something many people did naturally as children. Walking heel to toe in a straight line. Though it looks simple, this movement challenges nearly every component of balance simultaneously. Vision, inner ear input, joint position sense, and core control all have to cooperate. Performing it correctly requires standing tall, keeping the eyes forward rather than looking down, and placing one foot directly in front of the other so the heel touches the toes. This narrow base of support exposes weaknesses that normal walking hides. As difficult as it can feel at first, it trains the body to maintain stability in situations that closely resemble real life, such as navigating tight spaces, uneven surfaces, or crowded environments. Over time, improvements in this movement translated directly into better balance during daily activities. What made it especially valuable was that it didn't isolate one system. It trained integration, teaching the body to coordinate multiple inputs at once. The final movement turned out to be the most powerful of all. It involved standing on one leg while slowly reaching the other foot in different directions. Forward, to the side. Behind each reach required the body to shift weight, stabilize, and then return to center without losing control. This single activity demanded constant adjustment from the nervous system. Balance was no longer static, became dynamic, responsive, and adaptable. Researchers observed that this movement activated more muscle fibers and neural pathways than many traditional balance exercises combined. Practiced near a support for safety, it allowed individuals to challenge themselves without unnecessary risk. Over weeks, participants didn't just score better on balance tests. They moved differently. They stood more confidently, reacted faster to perturbations, and reported feeling less anxious about everyday situations that once made them uneasy. The reason was simple. This movement closely mimicked the unpredictable challenges of daily life, such as reaching for objects, stepping over obstacles, or recovering from a misstep. The body wasn't just exercising. It was rehearsing survival-relevant patterns. What became increasingly clear across studies was that balance loss was not a passive consequence of aging, but an active response to reduced stimulation. When specific systems stopped being challenged, they degraded. When they were reintroduced to meaningful, targeted demand, they adapted. The timeline for improvement surprised even the researchers. How significant changes occurred in weeks, not years. This didn't mean everyone became athletic or fearless, but it did mean that stability, confidence, and independence were far more modifiable than previously believed. The implication was profound. Aging did not automatically erase the body's capacity to learn. It simply required the right input. The most important takeaway is not that these movements are magical or that they guarantee immunity from falls. It is that decline is not as fixed as we are often led to believe. The nervous system remains responsive far longer than most people assume. Balance improves when communication improves. Strength matters, but coordination matters more. confidence, returns when the body begins to trust itself again. None of this requires extreme effort or expensive tools. It requires attention, consistency, and respect for how the body actually functions. If there is one message worth remembering, it is this: instability is not destiny. Many people accept it because they are told there is no alternative, but evidence from around the world suggests otherwise. Starting small, moving deliberately, and challenging the right systems can change how you experience your body, even later in life. Progress doesn't come from pushing harder, it comes from moving smarter. While no one can promise a future without risk, there is strong reason to believe that balance, confidence, and independence are still very much within reach for those willing to train what truly matters.